Just the three of
Oh,
us.
no.
Oh, yeah. You know what it is. We can make it if we try. Just the three of us. Guess what today is,
feel
Jay?
like it's confession day.
Oh, guess who? You know what? If it's, I would say if it's Tuesday, it's confessing, but it's Friday. And ooh, I love recording on a Friday.
That's true. That's true.
Getting
We're recording
something-
on a Friday. I mean,
Yeah.
you may be listening. You could be
I
listening
mean, you
on
could
any
listen
day.
on a Friday.
But, you know, if you watch the YouTube video, we are so punchy early morning on Fridays. We actually are dancing as we,
Yeah.
even our guest is dancing. So we're
And
kind
I
of
got
like,
no
"Whoa."
makeup on.
Yeah.
Rocking it.
Winning.
Hashtag don't care. This is what authentic looks like.
Yeah, this is really what caregiving life looks like. It is not those glam shots on our Facebook page.
No, it took a lot of makeup. And so, and I didn't do it. You know, Jay, though, in all seriousness, I am so excited. We have an amazing guest on today. I love me, Miss Karyl. I just think she's great. And so I was already singing with her earlier this morning, which is fantastic. And she was completely wowed by my singing.
She was. Actually, she didn't leave, and I'm excited about that.
Which was a win.
It was a win, and I'm going to tell you about her because, you know, I'm just so glad she stayed. So, thanks, Karyl. So today we have Karyl Cunningham with us. And Karyl, she is originally from Toledo, Ohio. She is, I'm thinking a Buckeye. I think that's what that is.
What?
I know. She has worked in the nonprofit sector for over 25 years. Her passion to serve led her to leadership positions with the Emmanuel Community Center, Cincinnati's YMCA Black and Latino Achievers, and the American Red Cross. Now, her caregiving journey, although she's cared for many, I believe, her personal journey started in June of 2009 with her husband, whose persistent cough and weight loss was not just, as he said, a little bit of congestion. It was stage 3B lung cancer. When they were told to immediately go to the ER after an x-ray at a local physician's office, she says her time with her husband was filled with a series of caregiving emotional tentacles. I like that. It makes me think, you know, it's just crazy.
It is.
Emotional tentacles that would take her on a crazy ride of a lifetime. And Karyl, that's true, because it is a crazy ride. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yay!
Thank you. Thank you.
So we love to talk about husbands. That just gives me a big opportunity to talk about, you know, mine and, you know, how he drives me crazy. And I know Natalie as well. So you've always been in nonprofit, sounds like, always caring.
She has a servant heart like we do.
Big time. But we have all run into an issue where people are non-compliant when it comes to going to the physician.
Yes.
So tell us about how kind of this started.
Well, you were born.
Yes.
And then you got thrown into caregiving. But a little background though about you and your husband.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
16 years. Yeah.
Yeah, we were married for a very long time. 18 years. And we met. He was a widower himself. He was my first love. And we ended up being introduced by a person that we knew in common. He was actually visiting a friend of his that he worked with, and he was in the hospital. And she came to see her husband. There was my husband, Jim. She says, "You know what? I have a person I would like to introduce you to." And there began the story. So yeah,
love a blind date.
Yeah, but he eventually, was, retired, and then he found a job where he was an IT director for a small college. And that is pretty much where, his illness, I guess, started in the beginning, that's where I began to see the weight loss, the coughing, and all of that. And then it took him after telling him, "Hey, look, we have to go to the doctor. We have to do something." And he was constantly telling me, "No, I'm fine. I'm climbing the stairs every day. I'm not taking the elevator. I just got congestion. This must just be a cough." He was taking all kinds of medication just to kind of get rid of it. And and I said, you got to go because you've had this cough for like more than 3 months. This is not normal.
So
I'm fine.
he's had weight loss and this persistent cough for 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah. And all the time he was always going back to the fact that he needed to just do probably take it easy, take cough medicine. No need to go to the doctor until that fateful day when he got up from the couch. He could only take 1 or 2 steps, practically leaning over, falling down, where he was just not functioning. So I immediately took him to the doctor, and it was from that time that I really felt kind of guilty. Why did I take him to the doctor, which was really up the street from us, as opposed to taking him to the emergency room? I don't know why I was thinking that. So I still kind of beat myself up for that. Why didn't I take him? But he was able to get into the car, and I think I was just thinking, okay, everything's going to be okay. And I was convincing myself of that until he got to the doctor, got x-rays. The doctor said, take him immediately to Christ Hospital emergency room. And that's what I did.
It was just a cough, So I think even in my mind, if I had been, it's just a cough, we'll just go over to the family care office and let them give us some antibiotics or something.
Yeah. Right. You never want it to be, I'll say this, Karyl, and I've talked about this before. Jason had swollen lymph nodes for 9 months and he had been misdiagnosed. What we found out is he was misdiagnosed the whole time, but I was going to go to the appointment with him. And then I had this work meeting. It was so important that I don't even remember what it was about. And he was like, oh, it's probably nothing. Don't worry about it. And I wanted to believe that. I think we all want to be, oh, it's nothing. It's not a big deal. Oh, it's just a cough, or, oh, it's just this, because we don't want to overreact. We don't want to be like, And so I still, to this day, I feel rarely guilty about things. Yeah. That's the one thing that I can't take back, is that he was there. He was there and I wasn't.
Yeah.
So I get that guilt.
Yeah.
Of like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you never do it again.
No, I know. No, never, ever, ever, ever. And I think that when you have times like that, your mind is so kind of like thinking one way and you're reacting. You got this level of emotionalism and you're making the quickest decision and what you think is the most decisive decision to actually help that person. So, but then again, I still feel like, oh gosh, I should have taken him to the emergency room, because when he got up from that chair, that couch, and just literally had to stop and then lean over, I knew something was wrong. That was not a doctor kind of thing. That was an emergency room kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, so you guys went, sorry, Nat.
No, and I want to go back because you're working at this time. So hold that call, Jay. You're working at this time, and you've worked in the nonprofit, and you've got a position, and you're doing all that stuff. So life for you guys had just been keeping on.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And then so you go ahead, Jay, go with your question.
That was it. I mean, so you've taken your day off, and we're all like, okay, take a day off and call in sick. But you go to the emergency room. So because they've told you to go, they're like, and that kind of for me is like, when they tell me I need to go to the emergency room.
Yes.
So what happened there? What are they?
Well, when they took him to the emergency room, he was sitting there, and of course they had, did a lot to get him back feeling a little bit okay. And so he was laying in the bed in the emergency room. And I said, how are you feeling? He said, I'm doing okay. He said, they're running some tests. And I remember watching the TV, and that was Michael Jackson had just passed away.
Oh,
I remember that.
Yeah.
And so he was watching TV, and I said, that's when I was like barreling into him. I told you should have been going to the doctor early.
I love that, because you have no idea how bad it is, but you're like, because what's the thing that we do? Like, oh man, like it's total husband wife banter.
Yeah,
like,
should have gone. I told you so.
Gone, dang it! Like nobody says that after you have cancer. Like
No, right.
Nobody says that.
Absolutely not.
Prior we can be as abusive as we want. Like, I told you so. I told you should have gone.
And I've won.
Yeah. Are we winning? I don't know now.
We win nothing, but I was right.
That was right. But
the time you never want to be right.
Yeah, it was, and so he stayed there, and then that's when they said they would have to admit him.
Wow.
And that is, it just was a game changer all the way through. So when we got there, it was like so I stayed there the whole night. Mm-hmm. And they were trying, of course, they always try to make you go home and whatnot. But no, I stayed there the whole night. I was there all the time. And the next day, I remember the doctor coming in, and he had a very serious look on his face. And they had went through all these tests and everything. And my husband was sitting on the side of the bed, and we were talking. The doctor came in. He said, yes, Mr. Cunningham, I want to let you know you have stage 3B lung cancer. And I just looked at his face, how does it feel to receive that, And so this is when you feel like you got to be strong, and you just don't let out the emotions and whatnot. And I remember after 5 minutes kind of listening to the doctor, and I was asking questions about, can he get a lung transplant? I was probably asking questions that were just probably very premature, not really understanding, being in shock as much as he was. And I got up and I said, excuse me for a minute. I have to go to the ladies' room. That is when I just had to cry. I just had to let it out. Not in front of him. I needed to do it somewhere because I was filling up with all this emotion. And I knew I wanted to be strong in front of him, to let him know that no matter what, we're going to get through this. And so came back into the room, and the doctor began to explain other details and, showed us, what had happened, where the lobe was actually being impacted on the left side, and that he would have to go in for treatments, chemo treatments and whatnot. So we went through that. And then my husband, after he left, he had some questions. Of course, the doctor answered the questions. And I just kind of sat there talking to my husband, saying, how do you feel about all this? Well, I don't know. It is what it is, And I said, well, no matter what, we'll be there together. And I just wanted to let him know that.
Yeah.
And it was really very, very tough. And after he was able to come back home, probably after a week or so, and he got back home, and I did everything I needed to do to take care of him. That's when I really started working from home.
Yeah.
But so that's a good question. I'm gonna interrupt Cal for a sec. So I know that initial diagnosis and how I can totally relate to that. Like, because JJ's sat in the other side, having been diagnosed. And I've sat on the other side where you were hearing the diagnosis and thinking, I might throw up. I had a mask on because it was during COVID time. And I'm thinking, thank God I had this mask on, because I feel like I'm going to throw up. And I didn't want my facial expressions. Yeah. But mask is like the best gift ever, because then you only see my eyes. And you can't see the rest of my facial expressions. I give it away. I'm terrible at poker. And so you get the diagnosis, and then you said he's in the hospital for a week. You go and you let that emotional release. And then, like, you're still working. And do you tell your friends? Who do you call? Like what do you do for yourself? Yourself?
Well, you know what? When he got that diagnosis, the first thing after I went to the bathroom, pulled myself together, I really felt that his brothers needed to know. Somebody in his family needed to know right away.
Yeah.
And so I immediately called the brother that I thought was the strongest in terms of hearing it. And I knew that his mother was, she was already in her 80s.
Yeah.
And it was no way I wanted to be the one to tell her that.
Yeah.
Because she had already lost one child. This would have, like most parents, they feel that they should be the first ones to go, not their children.
Of course.
And so anyway, I told his brother and I said, please make sure you tell mom. And he did. And so that was just very, very hard too, just being able to share that with them. But then I called my mother just to let her know about what was going on. And then of course I let my board of directors know that I was probably going to be in and out, probably more out than in.
Yeah. Were you in a leadership position at the nonprofit
community center?
Yeah,
I was the executive director.
Oh, okay. So that very similar roles, like leadership, leading the agency. I think it's so important, because you fall under the 60% of the 53 million unpaid caregivers and who work
full time.
Full time. And so, and you're thinking in your mind, because I ask these questions and I haven't asked as many people, but it's very similar in the sense of cancer. I work full time, leading an agency or in executive leadership. In your mind, are you thinking, I'm going to work at the same time? I can totally do this. I can nail this.
I did think that.
Yeah. So, okay. I just want to make sure we both had the same thinking errors.
And you said you decided you could work from home. Now this is before COVID. This is 2009.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because
so that was like
the internet was all super. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a novel concept,
especially in a nonprofit.
But you're like, I'm gonna work from home.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay.
Right. And that's what I decided that I was going to have to do. Unfortunately, I had very supportive staff that was saying to me, hey, Karyl, do whatever you need to do. We got this. What else do you need us to do? What are some of the top priorities that we need to do? So, and then I had a really great board of directors that understood, and they weren't involved in the operations, but of course they were trying to step in any way they possibly could. So I felt really, really good about that. I was determined not to miss a day of anything my husband had to go through. Work isn't, it's like,
But I think that's why it's so important for employers to understand that I think caregivers want to work. We don't want to leave our jobs, but we just need somebody to work with us, to allow us to continue our employment. Because most of us, we need to work. It's not like I won the lottery. I need to continue my employment.
Absolutely.
And but I just needed somebody to work with me so I could I could do the right thing.
So financially is one thing, Karyl, but I don't know if you were similar in the sense of I needed work to get away from cancer. I needed the distraction at times so that I could feel like I was winning at something, because I sucked. I mean, when I say I sucked, and the reason that I was not great at caregiving, this is where the reluctance come from, is that I didn't have control. When you acknowledge that you have no control and your loved one's just been told no control. Look at you, what you first said. Can he have a new lung? Can I go get him a new lung? Who am I taking the lung from? Because I'm getting on the black market right now. Right. That's the kind of problem solver I am. And so, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I do. I know exactly what you mean. And, it's those times that you feel, very, you feel very weak. You feel very indecisive about what's going to be the thing that it's like all this thinking because I'm a kind of controlling person. I've kind of moved away from, I've learned to not be
Are you recovering?
Much. I am.
Are you recovering controlling person?
I'm
Me
recovering.
too, until I don't want to.
So I pull it from the shelf when needed. Let's put it that way.
Respect.
So, it was hard, but, here's one thing that you don't have control over.
That's right.
All you could do is be supportive and loving and caring and be there. And you are absolutely right. This is when employers really need to understand where you're at in this journey and be able to help you feel relieved that the pressure of work you don't have to worry about that. We got you. You don't have to worry about that. You need to pay attention to what's at hand right now. And that's your family.
Let me ask you a question, because this also relates back to us, Nellie and I. So your husband has stage 3 lung cancer, it's important to note lung cancer can happen to anyone, because your husband had never smoked.
No.
And you don't want to have to classify that and say, I never smoked.
That's right.
But your husband had never smoked.
People want to know why you got cancer. This is the most frustrating thing is that people want to blame something. Well, you smoked, so you deserve to get cancer. Right. Jason didn't smoke, and he got throat cancer.
So when that comes to mind, is that something where you're like, I wish I could blame something? Were you angry? Because I know that's how I feel about Parkinson's. Mom was 48, and I was angry. I was like, she's not old. Why did she get it?
Yeah. Yeah, I really was, because my husband was only 62, and he had never smoked a day. In fact, he had never inhaled anything in his life, all those years of living. And, but what we found out was, and I always felt the need, because of what you all just said, people all of that, well, he shouldn't have been smoking. He must have been smoking. No, he wasn't smoking, because people assume that. Because of lung cancer, but it was attributed to Agent Orange, because my husband was in the Vietnam War.
I was getting ready to say he was in the military.
Yeah, right. And so that's what they attributed to. And so that was hard to receive that, because it was what it was. But I would have to say that the DVA was very, very helpful in terms of working with us and supporting my husband and whatnot. So
what's that acronym?
It's called Disabled Veterans Administration.
Okay.
Yeah.
So DVA.
Or DAV. I think it's DAV.
Yeah. So that's different, because we're going to talk about financial too. So he's a veteran, and he has veterans benefits, and I'm assuming I'm assuming that's his primary insurance. There's no reason not to have the VA insurance unless you suddenly find somebody.
Well, he worked for, corporate America. That's what he retired from. So he had insurance through,
so he had a couple of things. Gotcha.
Yeah. He never did have he never did go to the VA.
Oh, okay. So he did.
Yeah, no, but the DAV was just another subset of, individuals who had been through the armed services, who had gotten sick because of something, or lost a limb because of being in war. Yeah. They were very supportive, and they do have a direct line to the government in terms of Veterans Administration. At a higher level and whatnot, getting vet benefits.
Yeah. So you guys start this, excuse me. And what did they tell you his prognosis is? Because that's another mic drop too. So you're finding out you've got cancer. It's stage 3. And honestly, when they told us Jason's, they're like, well, it's either stage 3 or stage 4. And then they looked it up, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're doing. Like, if you're Googling what stage you're at, I'm leaving, going somewhere else.
Right.
But either way, 3 and 4 suck. Any cancer sucks, but 3 or 4 gives you like,
really?
And we don't even know what that means.
Right.
I know what 3 means.
Right. I really didn't know what it meant either.
Yeah.
I knew that, 1, 2, 3. I knew that 1, 2, you could probably, go into some type of, treatment, and then it can kind of subside and be in remission. But I knew that 3 and 4 weren't the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we were told it was terminal.
Gotcha. Hey, ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day. And the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the US and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing.
Yeah.
So respectfully, how long was your journey? Because I'm going to ask you questions about the inside of that.
Well, actually, Jim was able to stay with me for another, 20 months almost, it seems like. Yeah. And, the doctor, his doctor was really, really great. When we went, I was, was there with him, and the doctor would always say, "Okay, you're doing better." You check him, and Jim actually had a port, and I had to actually, because his lungs would fill up, and I hated that process of having to go. I remember this, that they said, "Now you're going to have to learn how to do this." My mother was with me when we were there, in the room, and we're going to have to learn how to do this. And it was a bag, and you had to drain it. Can't go too fast because it might hurt him a little bit. So James, you will have to tell her if she's going too fast. And I said, "Well, wait a minute. Do I really have to do that?" Because I don't want to hurt him.
I'm not sure I want to do this,
Right.
I had some surgery, and I ended up having to have a drain port as well.
Yeah.
And I know Natalie was there when she was helping Dexter, my husband. And I remember him doing it. And Natalie was like, not doing this, Natalie walked away.
There was this smell, and it smelled bad. It smelled like hospital.
Yeah, hospital.
And but Natalie but the only way I could get through, it was not painful. Here's the terrible thing. But I would be like, I'm going to pass out. And Dexter would be, I'm doing all the work. What is your problem? And Natalie would be the support person. She would be looking at me like, just don't look at it. I mean, and
but then but then I'm not going to lie to you, Karyl. JJ was like, I don't feel good. And I'm like, I don't feel good either. And I swear to you, Karyl, JJ passed out, and then I said, I'm going to need to lay down. And then I passed out, and Dexter, mind you, there's nothing wrong with me. I was a supportive pass out with JJ.
My husband was like,
passed out.
Send your sister home. This is just not working. But, I think, in a marriage, I don't think any of our spouse, anybody, you don't think about that.
Sickness and health does not go draining my port.
Yeah.
It was just nerve-wracking,
It is.
It was, and he would sit in there, and I would have a special place, and I even asked my mother, I said, "Mom, you used to be a little practical nurse back in the day." She says, "No, I'm not going to do that. You need to learn how to do that." And I knew deep down inside, this is your husband. You have to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
And I would wash my hands and take my gloves, put on my gloves, and he'll sit in his chair. I take that bag, and then I put it on, and then I say, "Are you doing okay?" "Yeah, I'm doing fine." "Are you doing okay?" And then just to watch all of that, I say, "Gosh, he's carrying all that fluid," because it would build up over the course of a little bit of time. So, and he had to have another surgery because I remember him. He had to go back to the doctor after about being home a week, after being discharged, and then going back to the doctor. And it was terrible. I had to call the ambulance came, and they got him, and he went to the hospital, and he had just, this was before all the port stuff. And it was just, all I did was just pray. Yeah. I stayed all night. His mother was there. My mom was there. We were in the chapel. We just prayed. Yeah. And the next morning, I, came back in 8:00 as soon as it opened. And he's sitting in the bed, and he's doing thumbs up like this.
Oh.
It was just amazing. It was like a miracle.
Yeah.
Do you think he
Yeah.
cared for you as much as you cared for him?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I figured. I
Yeah.
figured, because I'm just thinking, I hear you, kind of talking about this, and I'm thinking it's so similar. It's so
Yeah.
similar to, I think, in the sense of like, you're asked to do things as a caregiver,
Yeah.
and like the doctor's like, hey, you're going to do something. I'm like, doesn't someone go to school for that? like I have a degree in social work. I am really good at connecting people or organizing people or fundraising. But clearing out fluids or bathing other individuals
Right.
and not hurting them,
Right.
or cooking.
Right.
So
Right.
I can tell you right now,
Right.
cooking was not one of them. So here's the other thing. You all don't have kids.
No.
And that's interesting. And I hear you keep talking about your mom.
Yeah.
And so where was your support to include extended family? And this is not, everybody has different levels of support.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so where is the support? Or you've got people relieving you? Has your mom basically,
Yeah.
in? What happened?
My mom came down from Toledo, and she was like in her 70s at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And she, came down to Cincinnati, and she said, well, I'm just going to be there with you for a couple weeks. And I remember Jim being very excited because he had a great relationship with my mom.
Oh.
And my mom said, just take the burden off you. I said, Mom, you don't have to do that. But I still stayed home. I didn't go into the job. I still stayed home. And she said, you can sleep a little bit, rest a little bit. But I didn't do any of that stuff. I didn't sleep. I didn't rest. And I, basically wanted to be there every step of the way, but I tried to, and, I gained a lot of weight in the process, so I was no longer going to the gym.
Yeah.
I was kind of looking very, uh, tired and haggard and whatnot. But, I had the great support of my mom. Mm-hmm. And then I did go into the job, probably 1 week, and Jim had a nurse. We had a nurse that was able to come in just to check his vitals and all of that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then his mom and his brother would come over just to be with him and keep him company and whatnot. Yeah. And I remember actually getting more TV channels because he would just have to sit there, and I was like, okay, we have to move from basic to a little bit premium now.
The unexpected
the
of
things
caregiving.
You do, the things you do. Yeah, we had to do that with Mom to make sure that she had, when she went into to the nursing home and skilled nursing, she had to have the game show channel. So they were like, we don't have
3
that.
channels.
I was like,
it was like, cheese,
we gotta,
cheese,
okay, what does it take for us to upgrade the cable? Because
like, this sucks. This is how you get people out. Because there's only 3 channels.
We just need the game show channel. It makes her happy, and I'll do anything to make her happy. So let's roll with it.
I'm not gonna lie to you. You stick Wheel of Fortune in front of me, or the Family Feud.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you this. This is funny, Karyl. I don't think I've ever told anybody this. Jason and I were obsessed with Steve Harvey and the Family Feud in New York. When we would try to watch things, and we were very selective about what we watched. Couldn't be a lot of drama because we had enough drama in our life. But I'll be darned if we didn't enjoy the Family Feud with Steve Harvey. He was funny.
I tell you.
I love him. And so
I know.
Steve, we love you.
I know.
But
it was a distraction, because there's so much on TV sometimes.
It is.
That it's medicine, or it's, drama as far as emergency dramas in hospitals and things like that. So let me ask you a question. Because I think this is important, and I always say I've experienced this, and I'm like, can I pass off my guilt? Does everybody else see this? So when you're doing the port, or I know with Mom, when I was doing a doctor's office, or when she was in a situation and I was just worn out, or it was a medical situation, so many times, and we actually separate ourselves. We're like, Connie. I almost put her like in a third person. I have to step away and not be JJ, the daughter, but I'm like, she's a patient. And so when you're doing the port, things like that, medical procedures, do you feel there were times when you're like, okay, I'm going to step out of my wife, I step out of my daughter, and I'm like compartmentalized? Do you feel like you ever had to separate yourself from it so you could get through the process?
Yeah, I did. That I needed to actually become the nurse, that I needed to actually become the physician.
Yeah.
And that just kind of helped because one, those were serious things, when you're dealing with the port, when you're dealing with handling and managing them, cleaning them up and doing all of that, you don't want to hurt. You have to be in this mindset and this frame and just shift your paradigm to a new way of thinking and doing it. And I found myself absolutely, JJ, having to do those kinds of things.
Yeah. I think sometimes I would say, Mom, I'm not trying to be tough on you, but it's kind of a tough love. I need you to stop.
Right.
And I need you to like do this and listen to me.
Right.
And that was hard. And it's still hard with me for me to say, I need for you to stop and take the, mother role or the very doctor nurse role. And she's like, well, you don't have to talk to me like that. I was like, you're going to hurt yourself. I need you to stop.
Right.
So, and that's
you're so right, because it is so important. I would get not too much with my husband, but my mom, she's still with us and whatnot. But there's those stubborn instances that we experience, and I think as people are going through, they're dealing with their illness and whatnot, that stubbornness can really kind of raise its ugly head. And for us caregivers, we find that, dang it, just stop it already,
Yeah. And I'm not being hateful. I'm not going to be guilty about it. But I think so many of us carry that burden, like, gosh, I could have been nicer, or gosh, I shouldn't have said it that way. But I'm like, you know what? I was doing what I had to do.
You were doing what you had to do.
Now I'm going to step back and be nice. And most of the time I apologize, but that's okay. Well, and I just saved your life, but it's okay.
Well, and especially Karyl, you're living in this crisis mode. You're not ever coming down off this crisis. Like it's a chronic, we know how the end's going to be. Yeah. And so you're living in this constant state. So, for me, I didn't ever get a true, like, I think my stress response system, my body was like, you're going to start living here. You're going to live at a higher octane, and that because you're running hot all the time. For me, it was hard to not let my anxiety spill over into my communication with Jason. Not that I expect everybody to do that, but sometimes I would be impatient with him when he would question me about his meds. I'm like, don't question me. I'm in charge of your meds.
Right.
I mean, I hate to sound like a beagle, but I mean, I'm like, Jason, just take the damn meds. Yeah, I'm like, don't fight me on pain meds. I'm in pain, but I don't want to take meds. And I would get so angry. What do you mean you're not going to take the meds? I don't want to be addicted. You've got cancer. I'm going to slap you.
Right.
You can't slap him. You can't slap him.
I could. Like, trust me, there were a lot of conversations that almost ended up in World War III. You know that. But go ahead.
But it's kind of funny because all along when you're dealing with your loved one, they're saying, I don't want to be a burden. But it's like when you not do what I'm asking you to do, now you're becoming a burden.
Now you're a burden. Now I'm gonna beat you.
We're talking a lot about beatings here. We don't beat people, Karyl.
That was terrible, Karyl. But I mean, that's the thing. I'm like, and it sounds so bad because it's like non-compliant. Like you're like, I need a win. I need you just to take the meds, because when you feel better, I feel better. Like those moments of feeling better.
Right.
Those shared moments.
Feeling better. Yeah. That's right. And I remember the other big thing that I went through with James is that once he came back from the hospital again, he had lost even more weight. And just to see a person that was very healthy and robust, just kind of, just melting away before your eyes.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And you have to find your strength in those moments as well. Yeah. And I remember him often and sitting in that, because I had gotten him a recliner. Well, he was never able to sit in that recliner because he passed away the next day, because we had taken him to the emergency room again. But he would always sit in that chair watching TV and say, "You want me to put your feet up?" "No, I'm fine." And he would totally go into some kind of trance or something. And he would just kind of be picking at his pants. And I didn't know what that was all about, but I just kind of figured that this is probably one of those moments of, death and dying that that person is kind of dealing with, those segments of dealing with that. And I would look at him and I would just tease him. I said, what you doing? You want me to come over there and kiss you? Just to kind of get him out of it.
Yeah.
It's in his
And
head.
yeah, but I'm sure that is what he was thinking about.
Yeah.
And then I did experience that one day, getting up, and I brought breakfast up to him, and he ate it all. And in my head, I'm thinking, he's going to be fine.
He's getting
He ate
better.
all his food.
Yeah.
But if you've read anything, that's one of those things you will find when people are going through that process. And it was a couple days after that he passed away.
Mm-hmm. Karyl, you said something, and I love this. Well, in the beginning, you said he was the love of my life, and my first love, and you talked about, when he was distracted, you were like, "Yeah, do I need to come over there and kiss you?" Tell me about your relationship over those 20 months. How did it change? Like, tell me how you all continued.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there were things that I found out that he didn't communicate with me about. But that's okay. I got through that. It wasn't bad, but he should have, but it's okay. It's no stress, no stress. And he would always tell me, "I just want to let you know how good of a wife you've been." And I said, "Stop talking like past tense, You're not going anywhere, and
Yeah.
neither am I,
Yeah.
And he said, "No, I'm serious. I want to let you know."
Yeah.
And then he kind of took this stance of, "I got to get this done because this just needs to be done."
Yeah.
And I would say, okay. And he would do the necessary thing to get it done, because there was this transition piece with his corporate employer that he wanted to make sure that got done, and whatnot. And so he was doing those kinds of things. He would have to do it even if he was doing well, but that was in his mind that he wanted to make sure that got done. And he couldn't really do a lot of talking, because when you think about lung capacity, it's everything. Walking, talking, you really don't do a lot. And I just wanted to let him know I was there, and I think that he knew I was there.
Yeah.
It says a lot to his character and yours. The fact that you said he wanted to help transition the next person into his position. It's not like he's retiring. And I mean, that is a slap in the face. If you really think about it, that is it is the brutal truth. Like, we all know we're going to pass at some point.
Yeah.
But that is a brutal truth.
Yeah.
And
it is.
I'm not going to retire, and I'm not going to get to do these things. And, I could choose to be angry and be miserable for the time I have left, or I choose to be grateful. And it sounds like he was a grateful individual.
He was a very grateful individual. And I wanted to make sure that he understood that I wanted him to know that even though his quality of life, I wanted him to still have a good quality of life. And even though he was going through this transition, I did, keep his car, because I wanted him to know that, hey, he kept on saying, "I might be able to drive one day."
That's right.
And so anyway, I was just like, well, yeah, but don't think about it so quick. But I just knew that getting rid of his car would not be a good thing. So
that's smart.
Yeah. So we definitely kept that car around.
So Karyl, I'm mindful of our time, because I want to keep going, because there's so much. How did you take care of yourself? Did you get therapy? Did you have a lot of conversations with God? Do you like, how are you keeping sane? Because, prognosis, caregiving is hard, but when you have a terminal prognosis there, you've got a lot of stuff that's on the deep inside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How are you staying sane?
Well, I was saying sane, I think one is I had my mom that was there with me. And then I had some friends that would often say, let's just go out and just kind of get away. And I would look at Jim and say, are you going to be okay? Because he was still well enough to stay at home, but he still needed to have attention.
Yeah.
And I would just go out and not stay for like an hour or so and then come back.
Yeah.
And then people would always call, but I would always pray. I definitely did do that. Yeah. And then I had a friend that came over with a prayer call, and someone in a church made some type of shawl that he could wrap himself around. And so there were times there, but I still needed to do a lot more for myself. I was kind of eating raggedy, eating on the run, McDonald's, Whoppers, whatever you could get. And then, of course, if you're not moving, you're not exercising a lot of that off, and you're just kind of sitting with the person a lot and whatnot. All of the stuff that you used to do, you're not able to really do anymore because, you need to be with them and whatnot. So I needed to get myself together, and none of that happened until after he passed away.
Yeah.
That I felt that, okay, I need to start taking care of myself a little bit here.
Yeah, because it sounds like, I'd say for 20 months you were not, on top of the doctor's visits.
No.
Yeah.
I missed all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, because you don't care at that point, you're like, oh, well, what do I care about myself? I'm like, even going to the doctor might feel like, why am I taking care of myself? Almost like it's an undercurrent. I don't think it's I think it's unconscious.
That's right. It is unconscious.
I don't have time to do this. I don't even think about doing it. Why would I think, what do you mean go to the doctor?
Because things that he used to do more of, because we would separate our duties, in the household.
Yeah.
And now I needed to go to the grocery store, and get the special things. I needed to do this and go get the medication. I needed to, follow up with the doctor and make sure that if there's something I didn't understand, that I was clear on it. I needed to make sure that he got to all of his doctor's appointments on time. And so all of those things, needed to be taken care of because nobody else was going to do them.
That's right.
I was the one that was going to have to do those kinds of things. And you do tend to forget about yourself. And I don't think that people do that consciously, it's unconsciously, because you got to take care of this person. And so, you're thinking about it, but you're reluctant to do it, you are reluctant, to do those things.
Did you ask anybody to help you go to the grocery store? Did you ask anybody to go pick up meds?
No.
Did you ask anybody? Did you ask enough? Because I know I didn't.
No, I did not. I didn't even think to do it, The one thing, though, that happened, our grass needed to be cut. And so there's a neighbor that did it for us. And she's like, well, this is my exercise. And I said to myself, that's going to have to become my exercise, I'm sure.
There's a reality therapy. You're like, well,
we'll start mowing the grass.
The Lord wanted me to get my rear moving. So here I go, silver lining.
Yeah.
So, gosh, man, I can't believe, because I'm going to tell you, we just pushed right through. I'm like, the time is like pushing away from us.
The time is not.
I'm like, gosh, man.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's time for sister questions. And I hate to, because I'm like, I have like 30 more questions. But, Jay, Karyl, this is so good. Jay, go ahead with your sister question.
So you have it. Here's my question, or like, oh, here's my question. It's been over 10 years since, I think it's over my math. I hope it's good. Over 10 years. And there are some people that get in their grief and they have a hard time moving past it. What I hear from you is you're doing okay. So tell me about moving past your grief. How have you, because everybody's still in it, you don't absolutely let go, but tell me where you've been in 10 years. Tell me how you've gotten through.
Well, after Jim passed, I was going to the grave site every day at one point, and my mother helped reel me back in and say, "There's no way you're going to be able to continue that." But I felt that I needed to do that, so I did that for a little while.
Yeah.
And then it might have been probably a month after he had passed away. I said I needed to take control of me. And I decided to resign from my job. And
took me 6 months.
Yeah, I decided to resign from my job, and I said I'm going to take a year off and just deal with me.
Yeah.
And I went on this whole health journey, and of course I've gained some of that weight back, but I had lost 72 pounds.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was going to the gym every day. I was doing fitness training, and I was just determined to get myself healthy again.
Yeah.
And so I was able to do that. And I also, probably maybe a couple weeks after Jim had passed away, I actually wanted to donate his clothes. So I gave that to the Vietnam vets. They came to pick it up and whatnot. And then I went through this whole journey of just really tidying up the house, just really, getting things in order.
Yeah.
And there was just so much stuff that I had around and I hadn't done due diligence. And I mean, it was clean, but it was not the kind of clean I wanted. And it was too much stuff. So I really wanted to get rid of that, you know. And so I did that. So I was able to really, and then I said a lot of prayers too, just thanking God for the fact that he had blessed me to get this far. And I wanted to make sure that I continue that and do the right thing for me. So taking that time away from work was really, really important. And I felt that, and I felt really good about my decision with that.
I think all I'm going to say is I agree. I agree. It's taking back your control.
Yeah.
It's taking back and finding yourself again.
Right. Right.
So here is my last question. I have about 60 seconds. What is your favorite guilty pleasure? What is the thing you do for just you? What's your favorite thing?
Eating steak.
People are going to be like, steak should be an everyday thing, ma'am.
Yeah. What is that? Like Kansas City steaks? Hashtag. Please send steaks to Karyl.
Steaks to Karyl.
Omaha steaks, whatever those are.
That's right. They're pretty good.
Peyton Manning. Omaha.
Oh, now we've lost it. Karyl, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed you, and I really appreciate this podcast and the theme that you all are driving. I think it's very helpful. And when I was able to listen to a sampling of what you all had done, I just said, wow, these stories are still impactful even after all these years. Jim has been gone. That story, that those things that people say are still very important. They really resonate with me.
They are.
So the work that you all are doing with this podcast is very relevant, true. So keep it up.
Oh,
thank you.
We didn't even pay her to say that. You're totally our sister in care. That's my answer.
Well, yeah, definitely. You're my sisters in care.
Guys, thanks so much for being with us today. And until the next time when we confess again, thank you, Miss Karyl. We love you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.